Hi there. Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, I interview Jim Knight. Jim is the owner of Knight Speaker. He's the podcast host, thought leader, he's a keynote speaker, and he's also author of 2 books, Leadership That Rocks and The Culture That Rocks. We talk about many different topics around the leadership and culture, but I think you will really enjoy my discussion when Jim defined what culture means really in a company and how do you take the culture and align that with the business goals that it will help you achieve those business goals or business objectives that most leaders are trying to achieve. Whether your staff is working home or they work in remotely or they work in any location, maintaining the cultural side of the company and also maintaining the leadership connection with the people, this has been very challenging for the last couple of years. And so we talk about culture and we also talk about the leadership as well. What I asked him, what can leaders do to maintain that culture? And if the people are working home or different locations, what approach business leaders need to take in order to, bring everybody on the same page and maintain that cultural impact and teams and on a company wide. So I think you're really going to enjoy my discussion. Don't forget to send us your feedback. Until next time, enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is someone very special, Jim Knight. Jim is the author of 2 books, Leadership That Rocks and The Culture That Rocks, and the third one in the works. Very interesting topic, a great podcast. Actually had a couple episodes I just went through. I'm looking forward to our discussion, looking forward to learning from you. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to podcast.
Gurmeet, thank you so much, my friend. I'm very honored to be here. And thanks for already talking about the books right out of the gate. That's always appreciated.
Yeah, no, great book. Let's talk about culture first. Then we'll get to the leadership part.
Okay.
So when you walk people through in a culture, you've been doing a lot of speaking engagements and you've been coaching people. There's a lot of training program you run as well. Where do you think people get stuck when it comes to culture?
Yeah, I think when it comes to getting stuck, I think people first and foremost confuse what the heck culture is. It's quite the buzzword. Everybody talks about it now. It seems to be very important. Yeah. But you and I are old enough, I would guess, if I was to go back 25, 30 years ago and we start talking about culture, with a lot of presidents and CEO, when you get to the C-suite level and you start to throw down the culture card and talk about how we ought to be doing these things, it sounds funny and cool and it's warm and fuzzy. But if it's not practical or tactical or tied to the business operations, It becomes a little bit of a funny, fuzzy, esoteric word. It doesn't really mean a lot. So I've learned that, number one, I had to define what it is. And we could talk about that. But for me, the holistic approach is culture is really just a collection of people. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. Beyond the product or the stuff or the processes or the tools or the environment, it's the humans working for you, and they all have some pretty unique behaviors. And some of those behaviors are pretty awesome. Some of them not so much. But whoever's in your organization at that time, that is the company culture. So I'll stop there. I do think people get stuck with that a lot because first, they don't know what it is. And 2, when they do figure out that it is always about the people, now they really struggle because I know it's easy to say, but it's the hardest thing they'll ever do. They've got to go and find some rock stars to work in their business. It's the only way they're going to forever be able to perpetuate the brand longer than just 1 or 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So what does the culture look like that's more profitable for business as well? Also, it's a comfortable for people to work in and people performing on the highest level. So how does the culture look like? If you walk us through a little bit, your insights on that, what does the culture appear from outside?
Yeah, I think if people, again, realize that everything is based on human behavior, that it's getting the right people. So now I would start thinking, what could I put into place to make sure that I could measure against it? So I was saying before, because it's so fuzzy and people just said it was a feeling, but they couldn't actually see it. Well, then you got to actually see it. So I would do some of the tried and true things like making sure that your purpose, your mission, your values are displayed, not just for the customers, not for the end user, but internally for the employees. And you talk about it regularly. You put that in the job description, you put it in the performance appraisal. It's used in your regular discussions, not even in an appraisal one time a year, like on a regular basis. So I am crystal clear what we should be working on, at least from a core value standpoint. When I can see people actually doing the things within the culture that I expected as a leader, as a boss, now I can start to recognize when it's not going well and when it is going well. And here's the bigger problem right now. Coming out of the pandemic, one of the questions that I get asked a lot, and it sort of goes to your first question there, how do I manage this thing from a distance? Because now people are working hybrid, they're working from home. Well, now it's about communication. You got to have more department meetings, more one-on-one meetings. The president, the CEO actually has to take the time to call people one-on-one or do Zoom meetings or look for more fun, more opportunities to have some cooperation, some collaboration from a group setting versus just spitting out, disseminating information. So those are two things that I would do immediately right out of the gate. But again, everything leads to human behavior. So if you start there, you start thinking, what could I do to help and or manage or get back on track the humans that are working for me?
Well, that's been definitely a little bit challenging for a lot of leaders, especially people working from home, how to manage that, how to create that, keep that culture going. I know a lot of companies did that, many different, they did a lot of, coffee breaks on a Zoom or they did, many different, very creative way of getting together on a video calls.
And those are cool.
Keep people engaged. But that it's been challenged during the last couple of years to create that culture and keep it going.
Yeah, and I think if you were back in the day where we had break rooms and you could have the ping pong table and the company dog and we were doing beer 30 in the afternoon, all of these fun, cool things from an ambiance, an atmosphere, an environmental standpoint. You also think about some of the cool meeting spaces and the type of meetings that you might do when you've got people working for you. But once you get distance-based, it's tough. So I do think Zoom, which, I'm sure people are tired of Zoom, but there are some cool contests. There are some cool games. I've seen wine tasting that you could do, sometimes just to do it on behalf of trying to create that dynamic for the group versus it really tied to a business objective. Having said that, I just think that there's got to be as good a communication as you possibly can. I'll tell you now, people start thinking differently about the benefits package. Like you have to start thinking about perhaps mental health awareness and some type of counseling that might be available for people. You have to start thinking about pet insurance. I'm starting to see that actually be a big deal. If you can be flexible, even if you want people to come back into the office, could they work a couple hours from home? Could they take one of those days and work from home? All of that is starting to really matter. So I start to see, even though people want leadership, values, culture, all of those things, I start to see benefits packages start to be something that people are really focusing on to continue to amp up the culture.
Yeah, I know one president I was talking to a couple of weeks ago, and he included a gym membership for all the staff.
I love
150 staff. So he said, "Listen, I'm going to include as a benefit a gym membership." All right, so it's a great idea. If your staff is healthy, definitely is going to create that culture that, and I think more importantly, people working out, they're going to meet up in a gym. So it's creating that environment that we all working towards something and trying to create that company culture.
Exactly. And maybe, since we're just talking about benefits for a second, maybe if you're going to spend the money to do that, you're taking away from something that you would have done in the office. But I still think there's a lot of little to no cost things that you could do as well. If you've got your fingers on the pulse of the company, you know what the culture needs to be, meaning I know the type of people I need working there. What could I do? And sometimes, this is what happens with leaders all the time. They're so focused on the product, the results, it's the operational metrics. They forget to step back, which is the thing that CEOs should be doing, is thinking strategically. Right now, I think it's all about the people. I am below the surface. I am not focused on trying to get the customer to come back, spend more money, and talk about us positively. I do want that to happen, but I know that's going to be disseminated down to a whole bunch of people below me. What could I be doing as the president or CEO? I've got to think, what can I do to help amp up the culture, communication, benefits, those types of things around the human behavior. That's the direction I think to go.
Is that a concept behind that, Jim? Is that if you take care of people, if they are in a right state of mind and if they have a great culture, they will take care of the company performance by themselves. That be outcome of that, just taking care of people. Is that 100%. The reason why you don't want to take care of that? That you don't want to focus on the revenue and the profit margin and those items?
100%. I did not create that concept. It's the service profit chain that people have been talking about for 40 years. I mean, I just think, up above, you start to think about the fact that the customer, the only way that you could ever win, unless you're a nonprofit organization, you probably have some nonprofit people that are watching right now, but profit and even nonprofit, we always want to grow. You want to have a profitable business. The only hope that you can ever get there is you got to have people coming back to the well. They have to keep coming back. The only reason a customer, a guest, a consumer would ever continue to go back and spend their money, I don't care where they shop, eat, drink, play, whatever it is, travel, they're only going to go when they have a positive experience. Well, there's a litany of things that have to happen to have a positive experience. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets that. That is all above the line. I go below the line and think, okay, I want an engaged workforce, because I think if they're engaged, if the humans can actually, that are doing the work that I need them to do, if they're engaged, then they're going to parlay up and deliver the exact experience that I want to have happen. So now it's the exact same thing though. The only reason that I could ever have an engaged workforce is that they have to come back. The team members, the employees, the staff, they got to keep showing up. The only reason I would ever go to work ever is if I had a positive experience. Mm-hmm. Now you're getting to something. What are the 10, 15, 20 things that would make up a positive experience? And it's money, it's benefits, it's growth, it's development, it's love. It's giving me a growth opportunity. It's promoting me. It's looking me in the eye and looking at me beyond a number. It's keeping me in the loop. Like if you do all these things, now all of a sudden it starts to make that track up. Positive experience, they're going to be engaged. They're going to parlay it up to the customer experience. Now you win. Everybody's coming back. My goal would be, don't focus on the customer. Do everything in our power to make sure we create the culture for the employees. Now you're going to produce Herculean results.
Interesting. So in a time where a lot of going on, especially in the US, I think Canada is not that behind. We have a similar approach. We're shortage of staff. You guys dealing with a greater recession at your site. We have a shortage of staff. We just have a shortage of labor in Canada. Yeah. We have a shortage of skilled workers. So business leaders who are trying to scale up the team. For as the pandemic's getting over, we need to scale up your team to build that the same revenue stream, whatever they're gonna do, wherever the company goals are. Building those teams and finding those right people, and then when we're dealing with this kind of shortage of staff, what are the challenges you're seeing the business leaders or they're up against? How do they go about it, and how do they make sure that the people they're going to recruit, they're going to be part of the culture we just built? We were just talking about not pull them down on a different direction because they're coming from many different environments.
Yeah, it's funny, Gurmeet. I think about obviously pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, right? I think if you maybe had low unemployment before the pandemic, and there was probably a labor shortage in some industries. Now you go through this crazy thing that happened to all of us for 2.5 years. You had massive unemployment going on, and people just don't want to go back to work, and they were having to work from home, and there were a ton of layoffs and people that were just delayed for a long time before they could come back. I think about all of these things and where we are today. And I know probably more about the US than I do international, but there's a labor shortage just about everywhere. Even though we're back to a lower unemployment, the reality is a lot of people don't want to go back to work. And if you can't work with them and be flexible, and the fact that they want to work at home and be with their kids and hang out with their dog and cat and all that stuff, well, then I think you're going to miss out. So what I think is, and I'm going to be very bold here and probably say something that I think is controversial. I don't think it really matters what we think about when it comes to the labor shortage or what the unemployment is, because a rock star can always get another gig. It's not a problem for them. So my goal would be, if I was a leader of a company, number one, I would survey the land and say, don't look at the shortage yet. Just look at who I have. At how many percentage of them truly are top talent? I call them rock stars. Who are they that are crushing it? I don't even have to come behind them. Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Okay, I got to love on them and do everything in my power to get them to stay, because the more rock stars I can bring on board, it obviously is going to help me grow the organization where I want it to go. But then I got to go and look at the lip syncers, right? The ones that are just flapping their gums or going through the motion. They're looking for an opportunity to go anywhere. I would say whether you take them out or they leave on their own, when that happens, you have got to suck it up and leave the position open a little bit longer. So your recruiting processes, how you interview, what are you actually looking for? Is it just competence, or are you also looking at the other two C's, competence, character, and culture fit? So I think if you get hired to that, every single time, it's going to be painful. But once you get that person, and then it's not just going out and finding them, you got to hold on to them. Once you do that, it'll start to, again, grow the organization. Is that going to take more time? Yes. Is it going to require a ton of patience from you? Absolutely. Is it easy to do? No way. It's the hardest thing you're ever going to do. If everything is based off of the person, That's where you got to focus your energy. So, I think even in a country like Canada, if there's a labor shortage up there, you can't tell me anymore that you can't find any good talent. There is talent out there. Somebody else has got them. They just happen to have their meat hooks on them. Maybe they got them earlier than you. Maybe they're loving on them a little bit you. Maybe they're paying them a little bit more than you. But you can absolutely, when you're out and about, and I would say every CEO, every president ought to be doing this. They ought to be on the hunt, looking for unique people that will deliver them, whether that's dropping down business cards or inviting them into the business or trying to figure out how could I steal or pillage them from another company. I'd be on the hunt. I'd be doing that all day long. There's nothing more important, I think, than doing that work, because then all of the results, all the performance metrics are going to fall into place.
Yeah.
So I know I harp on it so much. I've been talking about it now with you for 20 minutes. The reality is it's about those people working for you. So hold on to the awesome ones. And if anybody leaves the organization, you got to go and find the really, really good ones on the front end. You hit those two areas of the employee life cycle, get out of the way. You're again, producing world beating numbers.
Yeah, the way I look at it, Jim, is, even there's a 5% employment or 4%, whatever the number is, I'm not sure what the exact number is. The way I look at it, there's a 4% people not employed, but there's the other 95% people still employed. All I need to do is to find a rock star out of those 95%. Yeah, because my number is going a little bit lower. If it's a 95%, it could be 90%, it could be 85%. But that number is so big that I can still find the people I need to find. I was talking to one of the business leader, president of the company, a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "Well, I can't find the people." I said, "Well, why don't you look at other way around? Maybe you haven't built a company attractive enough that you can attract the talent instead of blaming people that you can't find the people. Why don't you build a company so attractive that people want to come and work for you instead of going the other way around? Maybe take a look at that. What do you have to do in order to build that company that people are so attractive that they want to work for you?"
Yeah, and I'll give you two sort of examples. There's one that I use with a lot of executives when I was doing a lot of consulting. Now I make my living as a keynote speaker, so I'm a lot of times on the stage, but I'll have sidebar conversations. Okay. But if I get a chance to hang out with the executive team, sometimes I will look and see what processes do they have in place, and I might throw this one thing out there. And I know in the U.S. and in Canada we're fairly progressive in the types of people you could have work for you. Not every business is going to be like this, but I do say, what would happen if you allowed people to start having tattoos? They could have visible tattoos. What would they do? I have half the people that will freak out and say, never, that would never work here. It's going to go completely under. Would it really? Because if you had tattoos and body piercings and colored hair or maybe mohawks, maybe that's too far. I worked at Hard Rock International, so we have a wonderful palette with which to paint. We can hang out with the freaks. Now, that won't work for everybody, but I just use tattoo as an example, which when I was growing up, the only people who had tattoos were like people in prison and people in the Navy, like sailors. Yeah. But now everybody is getting ink on their body. So if you actually draw a line in the sand and say, I will never have people working with visible tattoos, okay, fine, that's great. But you are going to run out of people at some point. You know that, right? Mm-hmm. Like the really good ones, the really awesome ones, these unique humans, they're the ones who are creating unique experiences for your customers. So I think people have to start, you said think differently. They have to think differently in the way that we're going to treat them, the environment you're going to create, the benefits that you provide, all of the collateral, the video, the print materials, the e-learning, everything you can think of. But even aesthetically, the way somebody looks and is allowed to be on a first name basis with the boss and feel comfortable, that's when you're going to win. Because what you get with that, Gurmeet, is loyalty. You do that with me as an employee, and I'm getting paid a fair wage, get out of the way. I'm staying with you. Yeah. And this is the other thing that I would mention real quick. One thing I noticed coming out of the pandemic, the ones that were really awesome just exacerbated it. They're so much better than they were before from a cultural standpoint. And the ones that were crappy, they're either falling off the radar screen, they're going away, they're merging with other companies that are going to come and save them. Nobody talks about middle of the road. I don't talk about any companies that are mediocre. I talk about the ones that rock and the ones that suck, and that's it. So somehow I'm hoping some of these companies elevated themselves up because they focused on the people and really what they thought would make a huge difference from the end consumer.
Yeah, no, last week we have a recruiting process that we go through all the time. For us, is all the time we're recruiting, no matter what, I interview last Thursday and Friday, I interviewed about 32 people, 34 people, 2 days in a row because we're trying to grow a team. One of my favorite question is, hey, why you want to leave the company you're working at? That's one of my favorite. I'm always looking for, hey, the reason you want to leave, and what I hear is usually no complaints about the work, but I hear is a lot of complaints about the leadership and a lot of complaints about that company direction. Especially with the last couple of years, they just lost a sense of direction companies going in. So that's the biggest. And the second one is the leadership. So if these are the two elements that people want to leave, the leaders of the company should be focused on that. Hey, listen, let's take care of the people, and also let's provide some direction for people. What direction we're going in after pandemic?
Yeah. So whenever a speaker or a guest on a show start to talk about statistics, we make up stats like 88% of the time. You know this, right? I just made that up, by the way.
Yeah.
One thing that I know, this is such a crazy, crazy thing that you're talking about this too, because a lot of the work that Marcus Buckingham did, he wrote the great book, First Break All the Rules. He then followed it up with Now Discover Your Strengths. He worked for the Gallup organization, and Gallup, who's the granddaddy of all survey companies out there, they did this massive survey. I think it was over a 25-year span, which is a crazy amount of time, with 700 international companies. So it's not even just North America, it's all over the world. And they did it with millions and millions of employees. It's probably the most statistically relevant stat that I've ever seen. And what they discovered is that the number one reason why people are leaving is exactly what you said. It's because of the boss. It's the leader. They're going to say in the exit interview, money, lack of growth opportunity, like they're going to come up with a whole bunch of stuff. But the number one reason, whether they say it out loud or not, is because of the leader, which is within our direct control. Yeah. So it still blows my mind that there are still some industries out there that I guess are trying to muscle the result. They're trying to muscle the result. They're managing through threats and punishment and fear, the my way or the highway attitude. Even in the military, they've stopped doing that. It isn't so driven down and hierarchical. It's a kinder, gentler military in a lot of ways. So if there's a CEO that's listening right now and you're so used to just twisting it and getting the results for making it happen with people, you've been lucky. You've been lucky so far. Maybe that worked in the 70s and the 80s. It doesn't work anymore. Some Gen Z, some millennial, we're going to laugh at you and we're going to go somewhere else. So I think the days of that old school management style no longer work. I think to just validate exactly what you said, Gallup said so I believe them. The number one reason is because of the leader. That's in their direct control. They could do something about that.
Yeah. So let's talk about the leadership, the rocks, your book. So we talk about culture and we talk about also that the workplace, how big a challenge is for leaders. They have to do a lot of work to fix, that provide the culture and also build a team. So how much work is cut out for leaders, and where you think they're getting stuck when they're working on that? From your thoughts.
Yeah. So I'll go back for a second. My first book, which is a hardcover, it's color, it's very dense, it's very thick. I basically am deconstructing that, and I'm taking the main three pillars out of it: leadership, service, and engagement, employee engagement. Those three, when I get those three books out, it'll make up the new Culture That Rocks series. And if you put it together, it's a more relevant version of what I think culture is. So that first one I thought was my only book, but I'm doing a few more. Okay. Leadership That Rocks, the one that I'm working on, really does hit on exactly what you're talking about. I think a lot of leaders feel like they have now become a super frontline employee, that they were already doing the work and now they've been elevated to a position where they're a supervisor. They can manage a lot of these areas. Maybe they've had their fingers on all the different areas if there were different departments. But I think they have to think differently. Again, sort of that mindset of stepping back, thinking strategically, thinking a little bit more holistically about the business, sometimes making some really tough decisions that you're going to have to either take somebody out of the business or cut a budget here or get rid of a program there for the help of the business. And part of that is where you used to be an employee and you were working beside somebody who maybe was a slacker, maybe is a friend of yours. When you become a leader and you know for a fact that person is like an anchor, man. They're falling off a 12-story building. They pull and drag and wound all of us. And you might have to now as a boss cut ties with them for the health of the business. So I think the problem that leaders have is getting out of I've got my hands in the work. You've got to completely disassociate with that. I mean, there's every once in a while somebody doesn't show up or you got to jump in and roll up your sleeves. We all get that. But if you're doing that every day, if you're putting out fires, and it's awesome to be the hero, but if that's all you're doing, you're not growing the business. What you're doing is you're just working back in the business versus working on the business. I think that's probably one of the biggest issues that leaders have. I mean, there's a variety of areas, again, if they get stuck in a lot of stuff, but I think that one is probably the core, which, by the way, once they move from a single leader to, let's say, a director of operations, maybe they have multiple locations, whatever the business is, same exact problem. They become a super general manager. They don't think, I've got to think broader about this. By the time you get to a CEO, I'm hoping that you've got your hands on it. You know, you might have very few reports, direct reports, but you've got a whole army of people that are doing the things that you need them to do.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting what you mentioned. I see that person all the time. The making that decision, uncomfortable decision, which is, definitely that's where the hard work is. But that's if the leader's not doing that, what else you got to do? Now, this is the most important, critical part of your position. What you got to do, you have to make tough, uncomfortable decisions all day long. This is what we do as the leaders. And I see leaders that tougher the decision is. Sometimes they, the very common approach I see, Jim, is adding more time to it. I'm going to delay for another month. I'm going to delay for another 2 months. I'm going to do more research. I'm going to do this. These are just ways of delaying that decision. And as you know, delayed decision doesn't help anybody. You just causing more confusion in a team. You got to come clean and make a decision. But I see a lot of business leaders. Your point is well taken. That this is where they buckle up. They do a lot of tough decisions, especially what we've gone through the last couple of years. That you had to make tough decision. Either you have to reinvent the product or reinvent the services, or you got to do something, whatever you got to do, shrink your team, grow your team. There's so many different things we have to do. But I think that's where leaders struggle when it comes to making decision and moving forward. That it's just uncomfortable to make the decision, but that's what they got to do.
They do. And those, as you move up in the chain, the results, the consequences of those actions, your decisions are so much bigger. And I think you're right, regardless of whatever the decision is, and it's going to absolutely be bigger, it is hard no matter what. It comes even harder when you have to hold people accountable. So if it's just removing a thing, making a tough decision about the business, those yes, all of that is going to be tough for people, those uncomfortable decisions. The uncomfortable conversations, that's what most people avoid, because nobody really likes conflict unless you just grew up in it and you're a complete, total sadist, right? Nobody likes doing that. And so when you have to hold somebody accountable, to literally not just coach and counsel them, but to get them back on track. Or it sucks, but when you have to take somebody's job away from them, nobody likes doing that. But again, that's some of the hardest work, but some of the best work. And, I also point to the Oz principle. If you know those guys, the Partners in Leadership is the name of the company. They wrote the book, The Oz Principle. They're phenomenal. They basically are probably the heroes when it comes to talking about how to hold people accountable. Those uncomfortable conversations, not fun, but it's probably one of the best things you could ever do from a leadership standpoint. I will say one more thing too around leadership that I think that people make a mistake. I think they can do everything on their own. And I'm now such a huge, massive believer. I have an entire chapter dedicated to mentorship in the book. I think mentorship is instrumental. I think, yes, you could probably make some things happen on your own, but if you don't have anybody to sort of bounce ideas off of or learn from you, and there's always somebody that's smarter than you. Maybe you've got a mentor inside the building, outside the building. Maybe it's a significant other. You can even do some reverse mentoring. You're mentoring somebody else, but you've also got an agreement that they can mentor you when it comes to, let's say, some things that resonate with Gen Z or technology or what social media, whatever it is. Some of our people watching right now, maybe a little bit older. I just think mentorship is now probably the greatest level of maturity there is when it comes to leadership. And again, a problem that a lot of leaders will have is, I got this. I don't need any help. I think we could all use a little bit of help.
Yeah. No, I think besides being who's smart, I think what it is, Jim, is that, as a business owners, we're working in a business all the time. There's so many problems we're trying to solve. There's a people problem. There's a vendor problem. There's a customer problem. We're solving problems. There's so many blind spots when you're solving a problem. We need somebody to look at it from outside. Maybe we're not looking at it. Sometimes it's a perspective, and that's a big thing. If somebody can show me different perspective, I'm always up for it. It's like having that perspective is always a key. And blind spot, I'm going to have so many blind spots because I'm just focused on a business or people or vendors or customers. I'm not going to be able to look around all those areas I'm not paying attention to. So you need somebody from outside with a fresh set of eyes to simply, hey, you're doing all those things, right? There's a couple other things you're neglecting. Maybe focus on those two, find your priorities and You need that help from outside. Sometimes as a mentor, sometimes as a coach, sometimes it's just somebody just helping you out. You need that kind of help. Without that help, you can't make a progress. I can get there in a 2 months, but if somebody can hold hand and get me there in a 2 weeks, what do we get to lose?
Why not take advantage of that?
Exactly.
It's funny too. I think I'm a pretty good leader, but I can guarantee you I'm a much better follower. And it's funny, you were starting to say something and it resonated with me when I was doing a lot of training for Stephen Covey. So the Franklin Covey organization, a lot of people know 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I was certified.
Great book. Mm-hmm.
Great book, great training, by the way. When you can actually get beyond the book, it's even better. And I had a chance to meet some of those executives and Blaine Lee, and actually met several times Stephen Covey. We brought that into the organization at Hard Rock, and those principles still resonate with me. And one thing that I really remember quite a bit is the fact that you don't have all the answers. And if you can get to the point that you can understand somebody's position and not just tolerate it, but literally accept it, value it, celebrate it, it sort of takes the wind out of everybody's sails whenever you get into conflict. There are times, and I love doing this, if it's authentic. Now, you can't be doing it and be cheeky about the whole thing. You got to be authentic. But if we were going back and forth, you have an opinion, I have an opinion. At some point, if I was to stop and say, you know what? I love the fact that you see things differently. It's so cool. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not necessarily even saying that I'm taking your same direction, but yes, I might actually have my mind changed. Like, I'm malleable. I can absolutely have my mind change if you present your side with a lot of gusto, bravado, with some facts behind it. If I go, man, I've been impacted and influenced, I'd change my mind. I'm okay with doing that. There are people watching right now, they can't do it. That will absolutely just not be part of their brain. So one, I can be changed. And two, even if I'm not going to be changed, I can absolutely celebrate the fact that you see things differently than I do. And we're just going to agree to disagree and we can move on instead of back, forth. So boy, it has helped me from a leadership standpoint in so many conversations in the past that now I just don't see it as a big problem when I come into a space where somebody has just a different viewpoint. I relish it.
Well, that's how you make progress, right? If you're going to hire people or get surrounded by the people who are just going to agree with your viewpoints, whatever you're doing, you're not going to make a progress. You need a different perspective. You need a different viewpoints. You need people with a different set of experiences. When you bring everybody together with a diverse of these experiences and viewpoints and different ideas, that's where the progress comes from. Progress does not come from the same ideas or looking at the things the same way. You need that different variety of different things.
Exactly. That's why I think whenever you start to make a decision as a president or a CEO on what is the actual mix of people that should be working in my business, should they all be 100% internally promoted? That would be awesome if you could do that. But every once in a while, you need new blood. You need some different thinking out there. Now, you could go too far. Maybe if you had 85, 90% are hired from the outside, now you start to lose a lot of the cultural feel that you envision. I don't know what the perfect mix is. I just know I don't want to have to look outside because I haven't developed my people, but I'm choosing to go to the outside and bring them in because I need different perspective. I need people to challenge me and challenge the status quo. You're right. If you never bring that on board, you're never going to grow.
But I think the job for the leaders is to create the environment where all the different ideas are celebrated, or you figure out how do you get embraced and create a culture that, back to what we were talking about, that one of your staff has a different viewpoint, but everybody else going to embrace that, not just shut the person down and say, listen, we got to go this way. So how do you create that environment? I think that's a challenge for leaders to tackle on.
Well, I think, I've got some great friends that actually are performance behavioralists, but they were all former rock and rollers. They're all on the road. They just didn't want to travel and be rock stars anymore. So they turned it into doing some team building. It's a group called Banding People Together. And they talk about this communication and collaboration, and the language that they use is, if we're going to work together as a group, just like in a band, everybody gets a voice. Everybody has to have a voice. So even in the training they do, they make sure that they go around the horn, they go around the room and make sure that everybody is not only having an opportunity to speak, but it's truly valued. Doesn't mean it's always going to make it to the end product, the end result, but everybody gets heard, everybody gets seen. So again, it's tougher to do, I think, from a distance through Zoom and those types of things. But this is why I think maybe a president or CEO should have a layer or two beyond his or her direct reports. They ought to be making phone calls and Zoom meetings, taking 10, 15 minutes just to check up on people. Even that little bit of communication from the top girl or top guy, you just bought me for another 6 months. I feel seen. I feel heard. So you could do things like, every year doing employee surveys. Yes, if you want to do that, I have found, by the way, statistically, to do more than one a year. If you could do 2 a year, it actually gets people to stay with you longer. And if you actually are going to do something about it, if you come back to people and say, we heard you, here are the things we're working on, now you got me. If you just do a survey and you never report out, or you don't do anything with it and you only do it once a year, now it's just a waste of time and energy and money and effort and rigor for everybody. So, but I believe in those types of things, having one-on-one conversations, doing employee surveys, getting the top boss to have as much communication. Those are the types of things where I think people feel seen and heard. And again, what you get with that is loyalty. You're going to help in your retention statistics.
Yeah. So in order to do that for leaders, I think this is where the little bit tricky part comes in. Leaders got to be in the right, mindset. There's a lot of work they need to do on themselves in order to be in a position so they can help out people, create this culture and what we just talked about. How big challenges for leaders that, what do they have to do on themselves? Because they need to be in the spot with the right mindset to build all this environment. We talk about it. Where do you think people, is it a personal development, or is it going out and getting those ideas? How big that job is for leaders to be in that mindset?
Oh man, that's $1 million question. I'll tell you, I have seen so many executives of organizations who they'll read a trade publication, they'll get access to data, they might belong to an association, a consortium that maybe compares themselves to their competitive set, and that's it. And you know what? It's better than nothing. It's better than just them showing up and doing it on their own. At least they've got a little bit of a mindset. I think the ones that have a much bigger wherewithal, that have decided, I'm going to read a lot more. I'm going to read as many business fiction books, perhaps around my industry, perhaps a little bit outside of my area, is going to help me out. I'm going to listen to podcasts. I'm going to bring in third-party, non-threatening speakers like myself to come in to challenge the status quo and to talk about some things. Part of it to celebrate the awesomeness that they're doing, but other is to really challenge them to say there are different ways of thinking about things. I think these individuals should also join networking associations, which no CEO likes to do. Nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to admit, and I'm not talking about going somewhere, although there are, the Wharton School of Businesses, Columbia, these types of places where you could go spend a ton of money to be with your CEO set, maybe 5, 6, 7 of them, and we share a lot of these ideas in almost a mastermind to help each other's businesses. There's something to be said about that. There's a whole bunch of other little to no cost opportunities. Some of them are probably local in some of their cities where they can join an association to learn from other people, learn from other industries. So I do think when it comes to self-development, some will say, I'm reading the reports, I'm reading the stats, I read the trade magazines, I belong to a consortium, that's good enough. I talk to my executive team, that's enough. It's not. I think now you have to go beyond that. Podcasts, videos, do some e-learning, hire a speaker, go out there and join a networking association. You start to do these types of things, and all of a sudden your skill set gets bigger. You're just adding more arrows to the quiver. Like you said, what could go wrong with that? You're just going to get stronger and better.
Yeah. When I started a podcast, Jim, to your point, I thought I'm going to just deliver value for my, my contacts and also for the speakers. And I'm going to, build this YouTube channel. But I didn't realize that how much learning curve is for me in this one, how much I'm going to learn. Every conversation I have, like we're talking now, I take away more from this conversation than anybody else would, for me spending time, because I learn a lot. From before we have a talk, I had to go through your book. I read some, your a lot of white papers on it online. I know your website. So I learned so much out of that. So it's I think there's a time invested for me. That's the biggest takeaway. I haven't had one conversation where I won't take anything away from it. Every conversation I take away from more than anybody else would from this conversation.
Exactly. Everybody you meet is a little bit more knowledgeable about something than you are, or they just bring a different perspective. And you said it best. I mean, on our podcast that my business partner, Brant Menswar, and I do, same exact thing. Every time I go and speak somewhere, every time I write about a company, like I'm writing about bands and brands and leaders. So whether I know them personally or I had to go and do some self-study, I learned something new. And again, I don't want to be the dumbest guy in the room. I want to be able to hold my weight. I want to have conversations with people for my own self-edification. But part of that is because I just want to impact and influence more people. So if I can take what you just gave me, Garmeet, and run with it and share it with other people, and I influence maybe another 100 people, that's my whole jam. It's the whole reason why I do what I do. So I'm with you 100%, my friend.
Beautiful. So let's talk about your journey, Jim. How do you get involved? How do you become good at leadership and all those topics? When did you start it? If you just walk us through your journey, how do you got here?
Oh man, thank you. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'll say I started. I wanted to be a rock and roll singer.
Okay.
I wanted to be a musician, so I went to college. I do have my music degree in performance and education, but to make a living at doing that, you actually have to be good. So I changed careers. I was mediocre. I don't think I was great, but I was enough that I could hold my own. Very classically trained. I was a vocalist. I could still do a wedding or a funeral if I had to.
Nice.
But I wasn't going to be able to make that as a living. I was a middle school teacher for 6 years in public education. Absolutely loved that. Took a summer job working at a Hard Rock Cafe in Orlando in 1991. That happened to be at that time when I joined the busiest restaurant in the world. They pump about 7,000 people a day through that thing, doing $35,000 hours, which is unheard of in the restaurant world. And they'll do about $42 million in that single building. So when you work in that high volume, your skills grow really, really quickly. And I fell in love with the people and the culture. I stayed there for 21 years. Out of those 21 years, 16 of those I ran training and development. Pretty much everything you could think of, from print, video, e-learning, instructor-led. I opened up about 60 different properties, cafes, hotels, casinos, live music, all over the world. I started speaking on the side just because somebody asked me to do something over lunch. It's a brainless thing. They really wanted to hear the Hard Rock story. It had nothing to do with business. And I said, yeah, I'll go and do that. And I did it for free. And of course, somebody was in the back of the room and they came up after and said, can you do the same thing for my company? And how much do you charge? And that's when the light bulb came on. So I was doing it on the side while I was at Hard Rock for about 10 years, but I never took any of the money. I gave it all to Hard Rock. So I became a revenue generating initiative, which no training and development company does. We spend money. So to be making money was kind of a cool deal. But it probably set the stage for exactly what we all thought would happen. My love was to impact and influence people. And I didn't want to just do it at one company or even food and beverage. I was fairly known in that realm. I wanted to go vertically, retail, financial systems like credit unions and banks, real estate, funeral directors are some of my biggest clients. So automotive repair, another big group of clients. So I just 10 years ago, I decided to jump off the deep end and focus on the things that I knew well: culture, leadership, service, and building teams. Those are sort of the 4 key areas of my keynote programs. And now I'm just writing and speaking, and any of my training and my podcast are sort of around that realm. A lot of music orientation, a lot of band and brand analogies. This is the shock and awe with the hair and the blue jeans and the whole thing. I think it resonates with people when you can sort of bring that edutainment to the table.
No, it's very interesting. Definitely, you need to hold attention. We all want to learn about the leadership. These are critical topics for service. But if, by using music, if you can hold on attention, that's a greater service you can think of. You holding on attention and you entertaining and you providing that much needed the information and coaching these people. I mean, that's the greatest service that you can provide to humans.
Exactly. And it's, by the way, it's the reason I don't say I'm a motivational speaker, because I know what people have in their head when they hear that word. I am not going to be in front of a bunch of people and doing a song and dance and being motivating. And I didn't do this overcoming an obstacle. I don't want people to push back from the table going, oh, that was fun, that was nice, but they got nothing out of it. I'm an educator at heart. Most of the people that I'm in front of are going to be business people, and I want them to have meaty takeaways on how they can amp up, whether it's business, service, culture, whatever it is. So, I say that I'm an edutaining keynote speaker, and you leave it at that. We're going to have some yucks. We're going to have some funny, but I want people to walk away going, that was an awesome use of my time to make my business better.
Very interesting. Very good stuff. Definitely, I see a lot of, business conferences, and it gets a little boring after a little while, right? How many slides can you watch? How many presentation can you hear? But somebody, entertainment has to be part of it. If As a humans, if you are entertained, then we want to pay attention to something, right? So if you're not entertained, how do you pay attention? How do you hold attention on something, right? I think that's very critical. It's kudos to you what you're doing. I think it's much
Thank
needed.
you. Thanks, my friend. I appreciate it. Well, I'm having a blast doing it. As long as it resonates with people, this is probably my last stop. This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. When they start to say, that's it, no mas, we're done with you, that's fine. That's what I'll retire. But right now, I'm having an absolute laugh. It's just so much fun.
Good stuff. Hey, below this video, I'm going to include a link to all your training program, your both books as well. The best way to buy your books is it from your website? I guess that's where people go to buy your books.
You can buy it anywhere, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, but absolutely, I'd rather them come to the website, which is knightspeaker.com. Like you said, I'm sure that's down at the bottom. Knight is my last name, Knight, speaker.com. But you can find it if you're interested in it. And I have audio, ebook versions as well, if you're into that versus print.
Yeah, I was listening to your audio version of your book, Leadership That Rocks. It's a great audio. It's entertaining. I was working out and listening to it this morning. It's just my way of consuming all the book content. It was great. Beautiful stuff.
I love it. That's awesome.
Good stuff. Hey, listen, I want to appreciate the time. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I think, there's a lot of insights that you provided. Business leaders who are watching, I will recommend, hey, listen, get a copy of your book, go through your, both of your books, Culture That Rocks and Leadership That Rocks, go through those books and reach out to you for conversation. I think, you need those conversation, different set of perspective. Have that conversation with you. Who knows what opportunities you can open for them and for you as well, right? So I'm going to include all the links below. I'll recommend all business leaders to, hey, you're watching this, you're enjoying this, reach out to you, connect with you, get a copy of your book, and go from there.
Well, I'm honored, Gurmeet. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and I hope to see you guys soon. Rock on.
Thanks. Thank you.